Nyangzhi jambur zoldan hingmi zhang, zonan monam jambur ngab jabda, bakar tarngam santo shirmar. Shtumba tikji janla ki shigam sar, nichan rawar tsiringi zhangam sa, jagur tikji shanda yalarman, jimin banzo zhala suran. Gongki tukbam pawra shinjir lo, kirdig lam kirib jigso, pakba shanri zangwan chigla, kangsik tagda parur dewe denjar zhang, zhantak dengarin gerwe chogda wub gerba, tikji chimbu yundan shanda dribakang, tena rangab derdik pangde, Dikba yana ji jirkil zombi yondar jizi chambar shakshide tamba nam nyevram kobi wakshak lagcha jikte na rintang dang charabi jirdik lam kirki mangak chatsam jobar sharti te lag ni dingwar lamdan kirsir dang shkitba lamdan kirsir lo tangbo la ni kanzub dang tun tamba lap tenba wo tangbo na semchin dang semchin mayin ben tsaya nam shungdi dingwar ji inda shi mbajik jokba la Lo gomna yertim chamu jang semji zingga chimbo ki te derdikan da shi kangla gomba ten pen roba chunyin yinbe so derdir ramji gombi stobam per de jizigna kangna parchiwa yidmab dewan rambi jir songni dewi korkab ye me pa ji gong der rangab lo gomtsir ji lan yo pa mashi bar parur ji yertin kona nibrab zongwe shurur kongcho la leonar dingwar ji merche tigmedam cheberan yerwa yin der no adar langwa ji shawa yin Nigmus semjin dingwar jizar bir jimsin suzur tukbirtu mamba dala tiyo pe shinda shi goso di shir jatang nagdun laso bi warchiki mitsik butun nan laso ba tedag shungwalar dogba dang shi mamjongwar mafshi ki tedag lam jibki warchit kinda min tedag lam jibki warchit kiwar mini bar shago tertir gongwa na rangar dingwar lam tak chikda Mando piblo gagba dengwar te shungwa la gawi lo shkepar ni kib jib guba tambo na dengwar lam tak chigda mamtim bir nambar tene yidmag gawa zire chizam shi kyang guni me kyang nyingmu chewi tsir la ngipa yangdang yangda zhang la te panchad dengwar chirtaba shungyang ziri mafshago nyamdam pimba chagbu mangda gombar shajang nyang stop chir kepa la flapo te la guba guni me pan dengwar te chusu yot na magga sha maggo jam chusu mabdam na magga shi jang pamba me pa go nyamuk chewa na zeri mafshi na semtop ki dengwar chimbo yang rever tar da rever tar yang sang chapar tsorne kir lava yin zeri shibi gongor dengwar chungo yang yidmab dewa tsora mabzi pafnani shinda bzut kawa go deyang khwernam zimim sardigilar tugjib don dochik gaglo shi jang ngarwa tsamda zapar tardir dengwar ki gdongwa rnamba yid chichir xtadne zochin kit mini ba Wambur Gordonbi Mangr Namli, John Tart, Dinger Teter, Yishigim Sammer Muzonver, Lord Narta, Vigile Ransur Zonaju, Gum Gusso, Nipar Dinger G. Chokes of Tenir Gav Gombana, Dinger Lamji Chokes of Tenir Gav Gombana, Taylor Dinger Gang, Shong of Loni Damtambir, gave you rate of Chirgimena, Shir Tamke Danar Dinger Laptene Payon. Ndurtava tobo yodo jiba zamjik mangdab samgyang namka dan sergi var yang rang jibar tarta soni guban jabak gago.
It's raining again today, isn't it? In order to liberate all sentient beings, let us all give rise to the supreme and unsurpassed bodhicitta. Next, let's talk about the way to suffering and happiness. Both suffering and happiness should be transformed into the path. For each of us, this is indeed very important, especially now for the whole world. At this very moment, things are truly noticeably different from before for everyone. Various kinds of suffering are arising, and some of this suffering is truly very intense, making it hard to endure. Some people suffer because of the loss of family members. Some may have lost their jobs, and their financial situation is completely different from before. Some people during this process experience many different changes, uncertain and unpredictable changes, which in many cases also bring about suffering. At times like this, we especially need strong mental strength. But such mental strength does not simply come out of nowhere. This kind of suffering is very hard to deal with, very hard to overcome. That's why we especially need, now more than ever, this particular approach or method of working thoughtfully and carefully with both the experiences of suffering and the moments of happiness. We often used to say, samsara is like a house on fire, extremely painful, without relief. But this year, for most people around the world, there may be a deeper, more nuanced understanding, a new perspective on the suffering of samsara. No matter who you are, no matter where you are in the world, at any given moment, things that are hard to even truly imagine have actually happened. When these things happen in our lives, some people simply cannot face them head on and end their lives, or choose to do all sorts of irrational things. This could be related to our mental state and to the wisdom we usually possess. There is definitely, without question, some connection. Today, we will continue discussing the practice of using suffering and happiness on the path. The practice of using suffering and happiness on the path was composed by a great master of the past. As I mentioned the other day, the author passed away in 1926. This event occurred almost 100 years ago, which means that when we look back from today, but the instructions he gave are truly detailed, the suffering we all so deeply and profoundly feel today. He carefully and thoroughly analyzed it with great depth and remarkable clarity. I have also seen many instructions on the practice of using suffering and happiness on the path, including those by Rongzom Pandita. His works contain practices using suffering. And in the biography of Milarepa, using suffering and happiness on the path, in the works of some great masters of the Kagyu tradition in the past, such instructions are also found. In the writings of Mipham Rinpoche, there are also methods for working with illness and suffering on the path and so on. Of course, each of these teachings has its own particular emphasis and key points. But I think that Dodrupin Tempe Nima's using suffering and happiness on the path is indeed very targeted and very practical. In the 20th honest century, especially this year, 2020, the mindset of sentient beings drowning in an ocean of suffering, in many respects, and can be said to be quite pointed out with remarkable precision, it directly addresses the sources of suffering for sentient beings today. At such a time, recognizing the true nature of suffering, understanding this suffering, and learning how we can accept it and face it should be truly very important for everyone, except for a very few among us. Apart from those few who are accomplished in their practice, I think ordinary people are mostly the same. Whether they are Westerners or Easterners, whether they are black, white, or Asian, or people from all walks of life, of many different ethnicities and races, from diverse backgrounds, the joys and sufferings of ordinary sentient beings should have much in common with each other. At this time, it is absolutely very necessary to understand how to turn such suffering into part of the path. In fact, every sentient being experiences suffering. But when you experience the same kind of suffering yourself, or depending on a person's own mental strength and resilience, or their level of spiritual practice, the way they face it will be different. Earlier, I also briefly mentioned a book called Anti-Fragile in our discussion. Actually, this book is not mainly about Mahayana Buddhist practice. It mainly discusses the Western financial crisis of that time, when many people were suffering greatly. At that time, from a business perspective, strictly speaking, how to turn suffering into something useful on the path. For example, an extremely very fragile person, when faced with suffering, is completely defeated, utterly collapses and breaks down, and has no courage left to stand up again. This describes a group of fragile people who, faced with adversity, are completely defeated and lose everything. There's no chance of reviving him. That's one group. Then there is another group of people in the face of such adverse conditions, although they feel much pain inside, they are really very strong-willed. They might choose a different path, perhaps for their own reasons, or perhaps they are just very resilient and do not collapse in the face of adversity. They calmly and quietly bear this heavy pressure all along, never wavering, enduring all of their pain and suffering until it finally passes. In the end, they continue to live on by relying on their own inner strength. There's a group of people, and then there is another group, but only a very small minority, the same pain, feeling the same pain, accepting and enduring the very same pain. Not only does this suffering fail to crush their life or overwhelm their existence, but they actually rely on this suffering. He found a better opportunity. Then, by making use of these unique opportunities, they become even more perfect and resilient than before. Their lives become even more truly meaningful. Of course, this may not necessarily be a lot. So for us as dedicated and committed Buddhist practitioners, it is the same. We may not necessarily be specifically discussing financial crises at this particular moment, or how to deal with illness, for example. We are speaking as spiritual. Some practitioners, when faced with suffering, completely collapse and never get another chance. There are some practitioners out there who just keep on enduring, steadfastly persevering through challenges and persistently keep on living with determination, facing each day with resilience and strength, never giving up. Even they constantly remind themselves to keep going. But there are some practitioners who in their lives, because of adversity, because of encountering all kinds of unfavorable conditions, because of these reasons, they end up having an even more perfect and remarkable life. In many of our past teachings and practices over the years, it's said our adversaries actually benefit us. Because if we had not encountered enemies at that time, we may never know the true nature of mind. Take, for example, the Venerable Milarepa. If he had not experienced those hardships in his life, it would have been impossible for him to achieve what he did later on. Some words are like illness in the way they affect us. Because he is very seriously ill, they eventually came to realize the true nature of the mind. As it is described in the 7 points of mind training, the Bhikshuni Bhama attained realization later on, mainly because of her illness. So for some of us, it is indeed the case that because of the hardships we encounter in life, from a normal view, we may seem very unfortunate that this person is truly pitiable. But for them, because such circumstances arose at that time, they experienced great suffering, but later on, they found a better path. This too is something that is truly very meaningful and significant in this session as we thoughtfully discuss utilizing suffering and happiness on the path. I also hope that every listener can gain some meaningful benefit and also receive something truly valuable and worthwhile. How can we obtain this benefit? Actually, in theory, it is really quite simple. Here, it is not like, for example, studying Buddhist logic, where there are especially subtle lines of reasoning or in-depth analysis, nor is it like esoteric teachings which directly discuss non-dual nature or the unity of purity and equality, those particularly profound states of realization. None of that is present here. Instead, it uses rather plain, straightforward, or simple language without any embellishments or unnecessary complexity, making it easy to understand. It describes the mysteries within our hearts. If we can first truly, fully, and deeply understand the meaning within itself, in its entirety, and then familiarize ourselves with it. And during familiarizing, I may need to devote some effort and be earnest and engaged and immerse myself deeply in understanding its profound meaning. Perhaps these brief pith instructions could change our entire lives in ways we never imagined. Originally, maybe our fate was not very good, and in old age, I might have relied on unwise ways and done many things that were not in accordance with the Dharma. But after I understand the method of transforming suffering into the path, no matter what kind of suffering I might possibly encounter in the future, I am confident that I will be able to handle the situation with great skill, drawing on my experience and careful attention to detail to ensure everything is managed thoughtfully and effectively. So what is this? This is precisely why it is necessary for us to listen to and study this teaching today, and why such things are necessary. Now, I will continue to explain to everyone. We already covered this yesterday about, in particular, what kind of state we must reach. We need to eliminate the attitude of always not wanting to suffer ourselves. Also, when we encounter suffering, we should give rise to a sense of joy. These two attitudes are both very important. Yesterday, as you may recall, we only discussed the first one. So first, we are talking about how, in particular, we really need to completely eliminate the kind of mind that does not want to experience suffering, even a little bit. Many people might wonder, how can this be? I don't want it, but suffering still comes. What should I do? You might think this way. Actually, if I keep telling myself, let me not suffer, let me not suffer, I am always safe and peaceful. I will always be happy and joyful. If you want to think this way, of course, you can. But if you think like this, will suffering really never come to you? That's impossible. Every sentient has different karma from previous life. The various different things we encounter in this life are also different from one another. In this situation, if you just quietly make an empty, unspoken wish in your heart, like, I really don't want to experience suffering, I just hope that I am safe. Or if you visit temples to burn incense and pray to Buddhas, oh, Bodhisattva, please save me. You must let me be safe, truly safe throughout my life. We often see some young people, when they go to temples to pray for blessings, let us be safe and sound. May our dear family always be joyful and happy. It's fine to pray like this. Does praying have any effect? Yes, it does. But can it be fully realized? Not necessarily, because the karmic force of sentient beings is extremely powerful. This power of karma, it is like a flood rushing through a mountain valley, powerful and unstoppable, sweeping along. The force of karma is like a flood, immensely strong. So when karma truly manifests, and bodhisattvas, you offer 10 yuan, Bodhisattva, bless me with peace and safety. The karma you created in your previous life might have been accumulated over a whole lifetime or even decades. Can you resolve it with just 10 yuan? That's hard to say. Take a bad person who has spent his whole life stealing and robbing. When the consequences of such evil deeds are about to finally and inevitably manifest themselves truly at last, you give the police 10 yuan. Although the police do have some power, and leaders also have some power, but if you give leaders 10 yuan, leader, please, I beg you, don't let me be put in jail, will it work? Not necessarily. The negative karma each sentient being creates is still extremely powerful. So there are difficulties. That's why in our daily lives, each and every day, it's probably unrealistic to expect to never experience any suffering. Even if, for example, you happen to become a monk, or if you choose to undertake lay precepts, in certain circumstances, sometimes when karma ripens, wherever you are, when your karma manifests, you simply can't escape it. No matter where you go, your karma will, in time, eventually catch up with you. So what is the only solution? Of course, from the perspective of Mahayana Buddhist practice, some time ago you studied the 7 points of mind training. The 7 points of mind training is actually very important. We really need to study it very carefully and thoroughly, over and over again, repeatedly. Just going through it once is not enough. We should study it every year. And eventually, our mindset will gradually become softer and more gentle. Similarly, our current study of transforming suffering and happiness into the path will also be very helpful and supportive for your suffering. What kind of help does it provide? It is explained. When it comes to suffering, if you always see it as something unfavorable and consistently feel unhappy about it, every single time, no matter how fragile or discouraged you feel, it is absolutely neither necessary nor useful. Moreover, it actually brings about, as a matter of fact, some very serious drawbacks. He's actually talking about us right now. Please don't make me suffer any more than I already am, or always see it as something unfavorable or something we dislike. In fact, this approach is useless, fragile, or discouraged. You are, no matter how heartbroken you feel, it really doesn't help. For each of us, suffering will indeed arise. Suffering appears. I'm in so much pain, I don't want to suffer. I don't want to suffer. This really doesn't help because sooner or later suffering will come. It's very difficult to block out suffering. When suffering comes, it's like flood. You can't just use some very simple or straightforward method to stop it. So what should you do? If I can, I will try to find a solution. If suffering can be prevented from arising, that's certainly good. Whether it's your lifestyle or your personal spiritual practice, if at the beginning you can keep these sufferings from coming upon you, if you can do that, of course, that's absolutely fine too. But Mahayana Buddhism does not require that every sentient being must suffer, not what means. If there is a way to prevent suffering from coming, of course, that's very good. And this is also acceptable. But once suffering has come, if you just simply think, don't let me suffer, then that's of no use. No need for it either. The following 2 points will be discussed. First, it's simply unnecessary. If you keep thinking, I don't want to suffer, you'll only become more and more fragile, more upset, not necessary. But your suffering will actually intensify and become even worse. It's like a patient ideally. It's best not to get sick at all. But once you are ill, there's no need to think, I can't be sick. Why am I so unlucky? You shouldn't think like that. If you do, for example, your illness has already happened and there's really no need for it. If you say things aloud, does it help to feel sad in your heart? No, it really doesn't help at all. What happens then? Instead, you become especially anxious and irritable inside. Because of this, your physical illness will actually get worse. So for some people nowadays, for example, when you go for a checkup, the doctor tells you that you have terminal cancer. Some people, even with late-stage cancer, are fine. Whether it's early stage or late stage, is fine. The doctor says, no, you need to have the surgery, or after surgery, you need to undergo chemotherapy. But some people, as soon as they hear this, completely break down. At this point, because the strength of your mind is in particular especially weak, your illness actually becomes even more severe. If your mind is healthy and clear, well, if I'm really sick, then I'm sick. It's no big deal. Even if something happens, all phenomena are impermanent anyway. It's nothing to worry. If you have a mindset, then at the very least, your illness won't get worse. So this is very important. Otherwise, after some people get sick nowadays, in our modern world, they often say, why am I so unlucky? In this world, why did this illness have to happen to me specifically? What they mean is, I shouldn't be the one to get sick. If someone gets sick, it should happen to someone else. That would be more reasonable. That's probably how they think with so many people. Sometimes, for example, some of our Dharma friends, when others come to ask you something, why are you coming to me? There are so many of us. We have so many others. These people are truly very ignorant. Sometimes when the police catch some criminals, the criminal says, there are plenty of murderers out there. Why are you arresting me? There are so many murderers. Actually, these people are really, truly foolish. Foolish to the extreme. They mean is, even though I killed someone, you shouldn't arrest me, let me go. You should go and arrest the other murderers if you can, right away. But such thinking is an especially terrible statement made without any reflection. So in our process of spiritual practice for sentient beings in the sea of suffering of the three realms, we all have to face death and all kinds of unhappy experiences. Even though we often long for true happiness in our lives and frequently talk about the idea of being genuinely happy, and many trending topics online are often about happiness, well-being, and health, such as, for us sentient beings, is that really how we feel inside? Not necessarily. Everyone should be able to sense this truly for themselves. So what is it like now? No matter the situation, if I have even a little bit of attainment in my practice, I won't use these things or any of these actions to disturb or trouble your heart in any way, I promise. We talked about this before in Entering the Path Sutra. No matter what you encounter, Do not disturb your joyful mind. Worrying does no good at all. And you will lose all virtuous deeds if you let yourself get upset or feel hurt. Not will it do nothing to help the situation, but more importantly, all your virtuous actions, all your health, and all your happiness will disappear altogether. Once they're gone, then for yourself, from a medical perspective, your own immunity against viruses will immediately decrease. Many people, after receiving a critical illness notice from the hospital, become genuinely terrified themselves. Their heartbeat becomes even faster, and their nervous system starts to have all sorts of problems. After this happens, your body will naturally be overwhelmed. Some people, because of fear, don't want to eat or take medicine. Because of this, in the end, even doctors can't do anything at all. So what kind of attitude should we really have? We should maintain a relatively calm and ordinary state of mind. Practicing in this way is in fact very important, truly essential. We'll talk about this in more detail in a moment. Here, it will be mentioned that if you are fragile or discouraged, it's unnecessary. But it actually ends up making things even worse, unfortunately. We need to repeatedly develop a firm understanding of this principle. What does this really mean? I can't stop the pain, and there's no need to stop the suffering. So there's no need for you to feel discouraged or fragile. In fact, reacting in this way is actually really bad for you. So this principle in particular, you need to think for yourself over again, understand it yourself, and gain certainty. What does it mean to develop firm conviction? Not just agree with others. You have to reflect deeply in your own mind. When I face any kind of suffering, to that suffering, I might think, I'm pitiful, I'm unlucky, what should I do? If you get upset, then things will only get more and more troublesome for you. There's really no point in doing that. Moreover, if you let it, the situation will only get worse. So it's better to just maintain a balanced state of mind. It's not enough to simply say this verbally. Each of us needs to develop firm conviction. What does that mean? If you've studied the Lamp of Definite Conclusions, you should know, as you might expect. When it comes to suffering, we shouldn't be overly concerned or fixated on it. We need to develop firm conviction about this matter. From now on, what should we learn? We should learn that no matter what kind of suffering we encounter, we will never again be fragile or discouraged. We need to repeatedly and vigorously train ourselves in this, cultivate this kind of mindset, and generate great inner strength. This section is in fact actually very important. It may look like just a few words, but what do they mean after all? In the future, we need to start by learning. If you don't study, you simply can't understand. What should we learn? Our lives, we will definitely encounter all kinds of suffering. This is certain. It happens to every one of us. Some people say, it's nothing. I have never experienced suffering. I'm very happy. I'm very, very joyful. I'm the most optimistic person in the world. But maybe it's just that you haven't encountered anything yet. Once you face something, you optimist could quite easily become a pessimist, right? As you can see, in fact, it's extremely easy. So for each of us, while we are healthy now, right now, in this present moment, while we are happy now, or at least not suffering too much right now, you need to learn. You need to first develop firm understanding. You need to study. What should we learn to do? No matter what kind of suffering you may encounter in your life, at any point, suffering is caused by emotional issues. Some is due to physical illness. In some particular cases, some people suffer because they lack personal freedom. Some people suffer from all kinds of criticism and slander from others. Some people suffer from not having enough food or clothes, facing hardships. Some people may develop illnesses. Afflictions keep arising this kind of suffering. All the sufferings of sentient beings, the 8 sufferings, the 10 sufferings, and so on. Countless, boundless suffering when experiencing suffering. Every time we suffer, we can't keep being so fragile. We need to contemplate this principle repeatedly and intensely. What does repeatedly mean? It's not that after you hear today's teaching, after Khenpo finishes class, you just say Amitabha and chat away. That Khenpo is really so annoying, unbearably annoying. He just keeps rambling on. It's because he's getting older now. He gets more and more long. He repeats every sentence over and over again so many times. I'm happy, I'm happy. But if you never read the books again, this is not called repeated practice. You may have listened to a class today, but you still need to read it again tomorrow, day after tomorrow, next year. Even a few years later, you still simply need to read it continuously. Because any kind of knowledge, in fact, When we go over it again and again, over and over again, time and time again, repeatedly again and again, you could say we keep familiarizing, it will gradually, imperceptibly start to have an effect. If we don't put in the effort and just skim the surface, only looking at it when we're in the mood, heard the path of suffering and happiness, it's fine. There's nothing new to see. I've listened to it before, I've studied it before, and to be honest, it's really nothing special. For people like this, it might not have any effect at all. In the process of spiritual practice, you need to be vigorous. What does it mean to be vigorous? If real suffering comes up or occurs unexpectedly in my life, what should I do? You need to have a particularly strong intention in your heart. This is really essential. Some people say, I want to practice transforming suffering into the path, but they only go through the motions on the surface, nothing more. Sometimes when we practice Dzogchen or contemplate impermanence, everyone just sits there for a bit without any real intensity in their hearts. But some people are truly vigorous about it. Sometimes I can even see it myself. When we practice Guru Yoga, not just when we enter a meditative state, at the end, some people, even in those brief 1 or 2 minutes, are fully engaged the whole time. For some people, you can tell from their faces, it seems like they have a strong faith in the Guru and the Dharma. We must practice with great intensity each and every time, without exception, in all that we do. Points. One is that no matter what happens, we must not be fragile. If we understand anti-fragility superficially, then there's nothing we can do. Dharma remains Dharma, and people remain people. Even though this Dharma is precious, if it is to truly benefit our mental continuum, it requires a certain amount of practice. Also, we need to generate this great inner strength. You must develop this great mental strength. What does it mean to generate great inner strength? In the past, my mind was very narrow and limited. I couldn't handle anything at all at that moment. While reading the well-known and respected ancient text called the Jewel Treasury Treatise, which is recognized for its insights into precious stones, ordinary people generally don't really feel the pain that gradually arises often. There was a sage named Samyak Sambuddha whose teachings are thoughtfully and frequently quoted and referenced there in the text. It says that ordinary people seem to have no sense of suffering. It's like if there's a speck of dust on our palm, you can't feel it at all. However, sages have a particularly clear realization of suffering. It's like when a tiny speck of dust gets into our eye, we become sensitive to it and notice it right away. The sage's understanding of the nature of suffering, they truly, deeply, and genuinely have an especially strong, profound, and very deeply rooted, heartfelt feeling or understanding of it. For sages, it's like sand in the eye. They become aware of it instantly, as soon as it happens. But for ordinary people, they have no sense of suffering at all, just like the speck of dust on the palm. This is the analogy. It's the same for us in our daily lives. For most ordinary people, especially when it comes to their own personal lives and experiences, the suffering that happens in their own lives, in their day-to-day experience, they ignore it. That's how it is. Suffering is just suffering after all. But for sages, or those who practice well, they practice with great intensity and consistently, and in this way, even if their hearts were once fragile and narrow-minded, but after actually practicing for just a little while, our hearts truly become more tolerant and become truly extremely broad-minded. This morning while I was at home, a guest came to visit me. The person who arrived wasn't just any visitor, he's actually my cousin, a member of, he's actually the exact same age as me, but just a few months younger, honestly. When we were young, we used to go out together often. We often herded cattle and went out. Whenever we went out, he truly loved to get into fights the most, more than anything else, without a doubt. What was he like? Well, every time he got, really angry, he had no idea what he was feeling in his own body. No matter what the circumstance or situation was, that's just how he was. That was simply his nature. We hadn't been in touch for a long time. I asked if he still fights. He said no. I've joined a lay Buddhist group. Now, I am very different. I've even made a vow not to fight anymore. I asked, how often did you get into fights? Over 20 times. I've injured others on the head on several occasions with a knife or a stone. It happened more than 20 times, over and over again. That's truly, honestly how it was. Just as I remember it, he really, really loved to fight. But later he said, after I started following a certain master, I truly realized how serious my past faults were. I asked, what if someone hits you now or something like that? He said, absolutely not. Even if someone stabbed me with a knife, I absolutely would not fight back. I thought that the human mind can change And it truly does change through spiritual practice. Because in the past, and we were actually quite close, on my mother's side, we were closer, so I also knew this person's habits. Back when we used to visit some small county towns, I remember the quiet excitement we felt as we drove along winding roads, looking forward to exploring those peaceful places together. He loved to get into fights everywhere. He would use stones, knives. She really was like that. But later, through the teachings of Buddhism, he was able to soften his own heart with gentle compassion and understanding. Now, his old habits and temper have been completely transformed. He has managed to change himself. Such change is possible through the power of Buddhist practice. So for each of us, after practicing these teachings, there's no need for particularly profound theories. These principles, as stated earlier, for example, as we just mentioned, when you experience suffering, don't be fragile, don't lose heart, don't think to yourself, now I have absolutely no hope at all. Life is at its very, very darkest moment. At its lowest point, at its most dispirited stage, I'm finished, I'm done for. Why is it like this in this world, really? Actually, this kind of negative mindset, these negative and pessimistic thoughts, such as only make us fail even more in the end, after all, and lead to even more pitiful situations. So at times like this, it's important to have even a little something to rely on, especially in our daily lives, each and every day. We need to distinguish things ourselves. Now, some Western economists, as is often discussed, what do they think? They believe that essentially all our money, as they say, should not be invested in just one place. For example, if I personally have $1,000,000 yuan, I shouldn't put the entire million into a single investment company. Why is that? Because maybe I'll actually manage to make some money from it, and if so, that's really great. But perhaps the company I invest in is in reality just a shell company. In the end, it could lead to my complete failure. So it's better to spread my money across different places, invest just a little here, maybe just a little there too. If one place doesn't work out, there's another place that might be fine. So for us, even when it comes to love and affection, whether it's for parents, siblings, or your partner, you really shouldn't place all of your love on your mother alone. If your mother happens to pass away, you'll feel as if the sky has fallen. There's nothing left in this world to rely on. If that's the case, then it's actually very easy to fail in life, sometimes. And many of us have never practiced spiritual cultivation, which means we have not taken time to reflect on our inner. If the person you love most, or the wealth you're most attached to, suddenly disappears completely, at that moment, you'll find yourself helpless in this world at times. When you're in extreme pain, extreme sorrow, and extreme distress, you completely lose your mindfulness. You slowly lose your positive thinking over time, precisely because of this, as everyone knows, of course. Many psychologists in the world today also believe that in our minds, in our thoughts, and in our reflections, the IQ that we discussed in detail yesterday, as we mentioned before, when a person's emotions truly hit rock bottom, their entire IQ, it seems that it drops all the way down to zero. When someone is extremely, extremely angry, all the IQ they possess, it just suddenly, almost instantly drops right down to zero. If they have no IQ left at all, then the decisions they make are definitely not wise. So for some of us, perhaps, for example, when you are angry, in situations like this, it's best not to make any decisions, not any decisions at all, really. Otherwise, you may end up living forever in this way. Looking back, I realized that I did something in the past that I truly regret and wish I could take back. This is true for some people worldwide, isn't it? When you are in extreme pain or distress, you might pick up a knife and stab someone, or you might even cut your own bare wrist right then and there in that very moment. In that very brief and fleeting instant, that moment when you suddenly lose your sense of mindfulness and awareness, the things you might do can be truly terrifying. I think that as Buddhists, we will definitely have mindfulness in this regard. But for ordinary people in the world, it's very difficult. He had no training here before. At such times, they might do all sorts of things. I have visited some prisons. When I had the chance, I would ask, why are you here right now? Many of them would say, because I was extremely troubled at the time, I killed my own wife, I killed my child. At that time, I actually ended up using a knife on someone, and I did such things back then too. But later, I always regretted it. I had already completed it earlier, and honestly, there was really nothing else I could do, nothing at all. The Bodhisattva Karyavatara also teaches when desire or anger arises, stay steady as a tree. Or when we give rise to anger, we should remain steady like a tree at all times. When afflictions arise, we should remain steady like a tree. Many instances of remain steady like a tree. Actually, this is very important at such times. Because at that moment, when your IQ drops to 0, it's best not to speak. Just sit a while or don't really do anything at all. When your emotions or that painful feeling have somewhat recovered, the things you do at that time should be relatively normal. In this regard, indeed, in our worldly life, I remember that in the collection of maxims, it also says, when joyful, don't promise. When in great anger, do not reply to people's letters. This means that when you are extremely, extremely happy, when you are overjoyed, you really shouldn't make any promises or guarantee anything at all to other people. It's best to be careful. I have this problem. I feel that some people, wow, have done especially well. And I say, okay, well, I want to give you this or maybe that. After a while, I wonder, why did I agree to that day? I shouldn't have. I was too excited at the time. I shouldn't have done that. If you are extremely, really, truly angry, if you are extremely, absolutely, incredibly, unbelievably furious, in fact, it's also best not to make promises to others. Don't write any letters, speak with anyone, or agree to any arrangements or things with anyone. Even what you do in your behavior. In recent times, this even includes some very well-known public figures, as well as famous celebrities. Because of various issues in their own families, when they discover something, they immediately post it on Weibo or WeChat. Later, regarding their family matters, this has happened before, actually, even just last year, in fact. Some famous people, because of things happening in their families, he just can't stand. They immediately post it on Weibo where the whole world can see it. Then he really wanted to take it back, but it's completely hopeless. At this point, there's just no way to retract it. So sometimes, when a person is, for example, extremely angry, extremely troubled, or in extreme pain, all the decisions you make each and every day are likely to go against your true wishes. That's why the words from Gu Yan Lian Bi that I just mentioned, still important. When a person is extremely happy, especially overjoyed, you also shouldn't make decisions. Nowadays, there are flash marriages and flash divorces in the world. People get married as quickly as lightning and divorce just as fast. So what is this? As mentioned in the collection of maxims, at first, when you meet someone, wow, you feel extremely happy. You get married right away thinking you'll spend your whole life with them. But after a while, when troubles arise, you leave just as quickly, like lightning. This can even, in some cases, potentially lead to a wide range of many hidden dangers or risks in various different... Indeed, some truths in this world, as we all know, should be understood. The most important thing is your mindset. Mindset is extremely, extremely important. To achieve this kind of mindset, as I mentioned earlier, one thing is to practice diligently. And what else? To practice repeatedly. Also, you can't be too fragile. If you do this, your mental strength, your inner resilience will naturally and steadily expand over time. You'll be able to accomplish things, tasks, and goals that most people find to be very challenging and quite difficult. What ordinary people typically struggle to do, you will be able to successfully achieve with determination and confidence. Ultimately, this will also certainly benefit you. In the past, there was a text composed by Ashvaghosha Bodhisattva and translated by Kumarajiva called the text, which is known as the Mahavaipulya Sutra of Supreme Adornment. I remember there is a story in the Mahalayankara Shastra Sutra about a bhikshu who was teaching and expounding the Dharma. He received offerings and respect from many people. At that time, someone was dissatisfied with him. This person began to slander him in various ways. After a little while had passed, the bhikshu, who was deep in thought, turned to his loyal attendant and said, I want to praise him and offer to him. I want to offer him some clothing to wear. At that moment, the attendant said, you can't do that. Because this person is especially dissatisfied with you and has in fact slandered you a great deal. At this point, the bhikshu said, this slander is actually beneficial to me because by slandering me like this, he reduces my material gains and the 8 worldly concerns. I become a much better practitioner. Perhaps if we apply this story to our own world, it would be very difficult for us to do the same. When some people treat you especially well, you feel very happy. Because ordinary people, in fact, generally speaking, as a rule, well, actually, to be honest, no matter what, when others praise you, if you have merit, it's nothing special. Even if you don't have any real merit, you still, for some reason, feel happy. Some of us, when we receive praise from others, from those around us in our daily lives, even just for a moment, our entire mindset completely changes in the way we think and approach things. Even our expressions change. But when others point out your faults, no matter what, even if you really do have that fault, it seems you still can't accept it. Actually, you know, in our well-known and respected Treasury of Good Sayings, it says quite clearly and explicitly, others' praise does not bring joy, others' criticism does not cause suffering. If you can abide in your own merits, this is the true Dharma characteristic. This is said to be the mark of a wise person. But for many of us, it's very hard to achieve. So, through practice, we should definitely be able to do it. Originally, the power of the mind is a bit different from that of ordinary people. Just as I mentioned earlier about myself, if I experience even a little bit of suffering, I become especially fragile and simply can't handle it. Everyone has different afflictions. For some people, when it's about money, they feel distressed and can't tolerate even the slightest issue. Some people might be particularly sensitive about relationships. Others might be affected by different things depending on their own experiences, backgrounds, or personal circumstances, whether it's relationships or money or reputation, status, and so on. In this world, there are truly all kinds of things, really, all sorts of things, you know, and everyone has their own weak spot. Some people, feelings don't mean anything to me. But what about the gulumu money, you know, the one that everyone keeps mentioning? As long as it doesn't involve money, I'm fine. My practice is very good. I'm fine. My practice is very good. Some people, as long as it doesn't involve relationships, I'm really very generous. Money is fine, whatever the amount, no problem. For some people, their weakest point is, I can't bring myself to mention someone because honestly, it just makes me really angry. Everyone's situation is different. So what is truly best for us? We should always strive to have an open, expansive mind, to have a broad mind. The main thing is to practice in this way, especially in your daily life. Practice diligently. Mahapranya paramita. If our minds are clouded by afflictions, then wisdom cannot manifest. When wisdom cannot manifest, it gives the demons an even greater opportunity to take advantage. Why is it that sometimes, perhaps, all kinds of adverse conditions arise for us? It's because our minds are bound by afflictions. As it is said in the Maharatna Kutta Sutra, wherever we have attachment, the affliction of greed arises. Where there is hatred, the affliction of anger arises. In many situations where there is neither love nor hate, blind ignorance arises. Because greed, anger, and ignorance arise, state of our mind becomes abnormal. As a result, a great deal of suffering is experienced and ultimately comes about for many people all because of this. Therefore, in our daily practice, as we often find in our experience, we must practice with a strong, determined, and vigorous mind at all times. I believe everyone should find their mind changed. Everyone's mind still has greed in some way. We must believe that we have this ability. This is very, very important. Everyone definitely has this potential, absolutely, without exception. If you truly do not have this ability, then our practice would be pointless. But in reality, as long as we practice vigorously with great seriousness and diligence, our weaknesses, our afflictions, we can successfully overcome them if we work together. This is very important for our future. Next, let's further explain these two methods and continue to elaborate on the 2 points just mentioned. First, there is absolutely no need and truly no use at all in being overly fragile or discouraged in any way whatsoever. When you encounter suffering, no matter how fragile you are, will it prevent suffering? Impossible. No matter how discouraged you feel, it serves no purpose. If that kind of suffering can be reversed in any possible way, then there is no need to be unhappy. If this matter truly can be turned around, if recovery is possible, then there's no need for you to worry. As long as it can be changed, that's enough. If it cannot be reversed, then being unhappy is also of no use. If truly nothing can be done about it, just like a broken bottle, then there's nothing you can do however you suffer. It won't help. Just as it is said in the Bodhicharyavatara, If it can still be changed, why not simply be happy? If it is already beyond help, what use is there in worrying? If there is still room for change in this matter, why not happy? Didn't we talk about this earlier? No matter what you encounter, do not disturb your joyful mind. You should still remain joyful, because if you can actually change it, just change it. If there's a mistake, then correct it. Just change it. That's all. There's nothing more to it. But if this matter truly is now beyond any possibility of recovery, whatever you do, then no matter how much you suffer, it's unnecessary. So when we encounter suffering, it's best not to be fragile, best not to be heartbroken. What is the reason? Use your wisdom to observe. Is there any chance for this matter to be restored? If there's no chance of recovery and you keep being sad, for example, some people who have lost love are especially heartbroken, but at this moment, is there any possibility of getting back together now? If there is a chance, then you can definitely try to restore it if possible. Of course, you might feel sad, but you can work on getting it back. If it really can't be restored, then your suffering is useless as well. This is in the Entering the Path, a very sharp method of reasoning. For our practice, if we can do it well, it's an extremely effective method of cultivation. If there's truly no way to change it, honestly, then there's simply no way to change it. There's no need to dwell on it. Others say, don't be upset, that's not always possible. However, your pain and fragility are truly unnecessary. That's the first aspect. The second aspect is, if you continue to be fragile and in pain, there will be even more misfortune, endless misfortune. If you are not truly fragile, not discouraged, then by relying on the strength of our mind, even truly immense suffering will feel as light and easy to bear as cotton. Isn't this what many people say nowadays? It's not the events that crush, but rather their emotions that do. If you face things with great strength and courage, even if the suffering is very great, to you, it will feel just like cotton. Cotton is an extremely light material, and for you, it really won't be difficult to carry or wear. So heavy, it won't always feel like overwhelming pressure, making you lose your composure or your sense of calm. It definitely won't be like that. Like cotton, you can completely bear it. As long as your mind is still able to endure, even in difficult situations, no matter what happens, just keep holding on. Or if you are strong enough, fate will not relentlessly push you into a dead end. Not ever. If you have the willpower and be strong, anything is truly, really possible for you in this moment. Sometimes we ourselves also can see from our own life experiences that suffering is actually quite light. I personally have this feeling as well. Indeed, as we all know in life, as is often the case, like how Westerners often share personal stories and then gently encourage everyone to take a moment to reflect thoughtfully. I think the same way from my own perspective, although I am not someone who has truly realized emptiness or someone who has practiced Tonglen well, I'm not like, but when it comes to practicing impermanence, I am a little better. The cultivation of renunciation is also slightly better. Whenever things don't go well, if it does, I can look at it from another perspective. At the end of last year, I had originally planned to actually go to, according to my plan, by year end, Russia, Dubai, as well as Poland and the UK, several places, I forget, there were a few more, I believe. At that time, the schedule was arranged well. There were also some good schools and some opportunities. On one hand, I wanted to learn about the academic situation in these schools, and on the other hand, to share some ideas with everyone. Back then, I was really eager to go, but later, for various reasons, I was told I unfortunately couldn't go. In the end, I really couldn't go. Also, because of the pandemic, it became very difficult to go abroad in every respect. At first, I honestly felt a bit upset, so I wondered what should I do. Prepped so long I couldn't go. I thought, if I can't go, I just won't go. So I began to gradually make use of that time in a more productive. I began translating things, especially last year in Tibetan, Chinese texts that don't exist in Tibetan, such as the Sitigarbha Sutra and the Sutra on the difficulty of repaying parents' kindness, the Sutra on the merits of renunciation, and the Sutra on praising the merits of the Sangha, including treatises composed by Master Vasubandhu, such as the treatise on rebirth and so on. I feel that during this period, I managed to translate quite a lot, and it was even more meaningful. Looking back now, if I had gone to those places, I would have felt happier. But now I see that it was actually a good thing I couldn't go at the time. Mipham Rinpoche said, what appears to be an obstacle may become favorable circumstances, and an advantage can become an obstacle. This is most certainly indeed the case. From the perspective of a particular moment in time, some things can be very hard. But later, when you look back at everything, you realize, wow, it was actually a good thing that happened at the time. It was still very meaningful. Back in 2002, at that time, I was quite seriously ill, to the point where my health was significantly affected, and I found it. And there was discord caused by Dharma friends. There were all sorts of things going on. Later, I thought of taking a complete retreat for some time. So starting from December 2001, I went to Xiamen. I arrived there on December 25. On the day I arrived, I began translating the extensive biography of the Buddha. By May 3rd, I had completed the White Lotus treatises. If I hadn't really gotten sick or gone through those things back then at the time, I probably wouldn't have had the courage, because the long Tibetan text is 500 pages. The long scripture volume from Dirge was 500 pages. With 500 pages, I definitely wouldn't have had the courage. It was such a huge task. But at that time, things were good. Every day I would get an IV drip in the morning and read books, then translate in the afternoon. And during that period, the questions and answers on Tibetan esotericism was beneficial to me, though others might not find it. So questions and answers on Tibetan esotericism, the doctoral interview records, including footprints on journey. Many of these books were completed within just half a year. I personally found it all very interesting. By May 3rd, which is the deadline for submission for all participants, there was a tall building next to me that had just been fully completed, and my translation of the White Lotus treatises was also in its entirely finished. My illness, along with everything else that was going on in my life at the time, was, for the most part, essentially under control. After that, I returned. At that time, His Holiness was in Chengdu. Gradually, we made our way from Mialuo, and around June, we finally returned to the Institute. At first, I felt as if it seems that my life might already be slowly coming to an end. Mentioned in Footprints of the Journey, I was afraid at first that the White Lotus treatises, unfinished, I might die mid. I was ready for it. But later, apparently, because at that time, the situation for me, it's also a good opportunity, including in 2016, that year, as you may, of course, already know, my mother passed away, and I had surgery, as well as some major changes at the Institute and so on. That year, I also gave teachings on the Lotus Sutra, among others, as well as the ancient and well-known Medicine Buddha Sutra. I remember also teaching the 10 Wholesome Actions Sutra and the celebrated Jewel Garland of Supreme Dharma Treatise, and also Yeshe Lama, the great perfection of supreme wisdom. I gave several teachings, and the Treasury of the Dharma, that several were being translated. So sometimes for a person, when you encounter this kind of suffering, others might find it hard to imagine. And even you yourself might find it hard to imagine, maybe my life really. In some ways, because of this event, I feel like my life might be about to end at any moment. At such a time, you don't necessarily have to go down that path. You can choose another direction. In this way, there is space in that direction. For example, if my door is blocked on this side, and I insist coming in from this side, that won't work. If you insist on coming in, then I might as well temporarily can't get in. That's fine. So I think, well, at this point, what should I do instead? Then I just leave. Thank you very much, and goodbye. After I finish what I'm doing here, I take a moment, and then I leave and go somewhere else. Then you can practice meditation from another place, if you prefer, which might actually be even more interesting. So in our lives, truly, everyone may have a comparison at some point. Some pains different from the past. At such times, you may need to prepare yourself. When you face this, start to use what you did before or find another way. To search for the meaning of your life, at that time, there are no obstacles or hindrances in this phase. This is indeed truly very meaningful in many different ways. So, as I said, if you are not fragile,
your mental strength should be relatively strong. Even a great suffering such as this will not be harmful to you in any way. Not at all. It is because of fragility and discouragement that even a tiny bit of suffering can bring about an intense feeling of unhappiness and become hard to bear. Conversely, when it comes to very minor, tiny bits of suffering, sometimes this kind of pain might at times make you think, I'm suffering much, what should I do? So what does this add? Even more unhappiness. In the end, after everything you've tried to do, you might really be crushed by it, unable to escape the overwhelming weight and pressure, or feel that absolutely everything about yourself, quite literally in every way, I've reached a point where I simply cannot go on any longer, as I have no strength left to continue. On the magnitude of suffering, everyone's overall mental strength still differs to some extent. For example, when I am teaching or giving a talk, sometimes the speaker is unintentional, but the listener takes it to heart. When I say something, it might not be that serious to me, really, but the listener might immediately have a different reaction. So even a very small amount of suffering, even just a little, is not really measured by its actual size, but rather should simply be considered in terms of the strength of one's own mind. In the Bodhicariyavatara, it is also said, if your afflictions are deep, even a very small pain can become something really big. It's like a crow in front of a dead snake. It can appear at times as mighty and awe-inspiring as a Garuda. Please note, if your mind is indeed extremely fragile, then even the tiniest bit of suffering can feel overwhelming to you. So sometimes we really need to take a look at our own minds. All beings are really very pitiable. Sometimes I think for many of us now, the suffering we consider to be so intense is actually quite pitiable. In fact, this kind of suffering, it really isn't actually all that powerful or overwhelming. But before the karma of sentient beings is purified, they themselves feel it as extremely painful. That's why it's really absolutely essential and necessary for us now, truly necessary, to learn methods for transforming suffering into the path. Moreover, in this world, as I mentioned earlier yesterday, in our daily lives, a blessing in disguise is a phrase that refers to something that seems unfortunate. I wanted to tell this story yesterday, but there wasn't enough time for me yesterday. At that particular time, when the wise and elderly old man from the distant frontier first happened to lose his beloved horse, his kind, caring, and concerned neighbors would often come to comfort him from time to time. "Your horse is lost. How truly pitiful that is indeed. Please, don't be too sad." But the old man said, "It's fine, it might not be bad." After some time, the lost horse returned, bringing along a colt. Then the neighbor exclaimed, pausing for a moment, "Wow, you are truly so very, very fortunate indeed. Congratulations." But he replied, it might not necessarily be a good thing. Sometime later, because as his son was actually riding the horse at that very moment, he ended up unfortunately fracturing his leg. Perhaps I'm not telling this story exactly right, at least not entirely if I'm being honest. But after his young son unfortunately broke his leg in an unexpected accident, his neighbor came and said, "You're so unlucky. How could it be that your precious son's leg is now disabled?" But the old man said, "It's fine. This might not necessarily be a bad thing." Then, after some time, it seemed that, in fact, all the boys had to enlist and go to war. Because his son was injured, he didn't actually have to go. In the end, this saved his life. So at the time, it really seemed like what we thought might be good, the old man thought may not be good. He is truly in everything. What we think is good may not be good, and what we think is bad may not be bad. He had this kind of mindset. As a practitioner, you really need to have this attitude. Having a good reputation isn't always a good thing. Once you become famous, it might be your downfall. When you have money, having money isn't necessarily good either. With money, you might just become even more arrogant, and then you could end up ruined. If you don't have money, you might think, "I'm penniless now. What should I do next?" It might not be a bad thing. It could give you more renunciation. "I'm feeling sick today. I'm in a lot of pain." With no freedom for you, this could be better. So as Mahayana Buddhists, we actually have even more strength in our practice than the old man. With this mindset, whatever we encounter in life, you should be able to accept it, right? Some branches of psychology discuss about fixed mindsets and lifestyles, and also what's called a growth mindset or way of living. So what is a fixed way of living? Like when a child, his score must be in the top 3 absolutely among all the competitors. That's a kind of fixed mindset. But if you have a growth mindset, you might not always achieve that. If you can't do it, you won't do well on the test. Use it as a lesson or warning to yourself. With this lesson, you tell yourself, next time I'll definitely do better. Because you didn't get a good grade, you start to view from another perspective. In this way, the child's mindset will gradually grow and develop over time. Our spiritual practice is the same. Normally, we usually follow our own set of rules. I must be truly healthy and happy. This is how most of us often think. Actually, it's a fairly standard way of thinking in most cases. But not everyone will actually be healthy or have everything go smoothly. Will everything turn out that way? Not always. Maybe for each person, as people often say, plans can't keep up with changes. This is your plan. But things can easily change. When changes occur, first, you should always make sure that you are well prepared for them and ready for whatever may come. To put it another way, what I'm essentially trying to communicate here is this. In summary, the main point I want to make can be expressed as follows. And I hope to make, if you add a lot of unnecessary suffering and find it hard to bear, for example, when you're longing for a beautiful woman's lovely appearance, even if you try to suppress your desire, it will be in vain. When your afflictions have truly arisen and you keep thinking over and over again about her truly incredible beauty, your greed will definitely arise. When your greed appears, if you want to try to suppress it, honestly, there's really nothing you can actually do. Same principle applies. Because your mind is basically focused on the state of being overwhelmed by all the suffering you are experiencing, you simply can't possibly endure it. Truly, you really can't. Analogy mentioned earlier, but it's fine to connect it with what follows or even leave it out. The point is, greed and anger are relative to each other. If it's greed, it's also an affliction. If your mind is focused on whether it's a truly beautiful woman or a remarkably handsome man or any other attractive object, this affliction will naturally arise in you. At that time, it's very difficult to block it. Same rule. You always think, I'm miserable and unlucky. And your mind is focused on the state of being oppressed, then you will definitely find it hard to endure in your heart. If you keep thinking it's suffering and your mind is always focused on it, didn't we talk about this yesterday? If the mind of suffering keeps being habituated, it'll increase. This is a natural law. So what exactly do we need to do? As mentioned in the various instructions on guarding the sense doors, if you are someone with strong desire, the first thing is to guard your sense doors as much as possible. How do you protect your faculty of sight? Protect mind faculty. Protect them mindfully, just as is explained in the precepts and instructions. First, if you have these instructions, when you encounter an attractive object, your mind won't remain fixated on it because you regard it as something impure or see it as the source of all suffering, the origin of all impurity and so on. You won't develop craving or attachment. Similarly, the mind does not grasp onto that suffering as a fixed object. Your heart, I am in so much pain, and become especially fixated in that way. The mind remains quite naturally in a calm and normal state. This is very important. As I mentioned earlier about our mind, if the mind is not in a normal state, or if it is even slightly disturbed or unsettled, then nothing it does will be quite right. It will definitely, some people, because their minds are not in a normal state, may self-harm, possibly even commit suicide or do all sorts of things. Any number of different things can be done. If our mind is, you could say, in a normal state, then no matter how great the suffering, it is very difficult for it to truly harm you. So this part is also extremely important. Whether it is when our greed arises or when anger arises, these are all, as we can see, very illusory, deluded thoughts as they appear to us. They are all misattention and inverted perceptions. What these inverted perceptions lead to, they cause us sentient beings a great deal of suffering. Therefore, when it comes to the state of our mind, it should be in its original state. Of course, the original state, the natural state, just as it is, has two types. One, in world, a calm and peaceful state of mind. In such a state, whatever you do is very reasonable. So whenever we carefully make any important decisions in our lives, we must ensure our mind is in a relatively normal state before taking action. On this point, I hope many of us Buddhists will not choose suicide or engage in many improper actions. But if the mind is not in the right state, and especially when the mind is particularly chaotic, then all kinds of ghosts, spirits, and external will seize the opportunity at this moment. Some of us often have suicidal thoughts. When it reaches a point when the mind is very agitated, then demons will guide you, come here, if you end your life, you'll be happy. That's why nowadays many people say online, I'm very happy right now, I'm about to commit suicide. They say a lot on Weibo, the social media platform, I'm particularly happy. The most wonderful, happiest thing in the world, I'm about to leave this world. After all, the next world is the happiest, most beautiful place. After saying this, they quickly jump into the river. There are cases like this, so sometimes some spirits or ghosts come to guide them. Sometimes people are not in control. So when your state of mind isn't very good, you should pray to the Guru and the Three Jewels. Otherwise, as Buddhists, we sometimes experience all kinds. This is not really very good either, honestly. Originally, I wanted to combine this with the following principles to explain which might be even better. But what is the main point of the above? When we experience suffering, we shouldn't think we shouldn't suffer. When suffering arises, you need to accept it. The reason for accepting will be explained below. Something important coming soon. When suffering comes, you should be even happier. I'm so fortunate. Today, my state of mind isn't good. I'm troubled. I'm really amazing today. My mind is so disturbed. This is how it should be. So the way practitioners live is, in certain respects, quite a bit different from the way ordinary people live. So there are some things that are very hard for ordinary people to face. For practitioner, it feels as light as soft, comfortable cotton, almost like if your parents pass away, how could ordinary people possibly accept that? It's extremely, extremely painful. If you find yourself in a situation where you have lost every single dollar you once had with your entire, then there's nothing you can do. As practitioner, I think there should be a way to handle it. Of course, like was mentioned earlier, one is to practice more, for example, consistently on a regular basis. Another is to practice and also to broaden your state of mind. If you really can't do these three things, then suffering is just suffering and practice is just practice. Becoming monk, useless. Even taking lay precepts is really of no use. You might say, I'm a disciple of such and such Dharma king or masters. I have practiced under him for over 20 years now. 20 plus years practice are just like what is said in the Shumu maxim, a stone placed in water for 100 years. But the stone won't get wet. So if you lived at a monastery for many years, if you haven't practiced diligently, if you haven't changed your own mental continuum, your master may truly, perhaps even genuinely, be someone with realization. But look at Bhikshu Sunakshatar, how many years did he spend in front of the Buddha? In the end, he still didn't change. So to transform yourself, it doesn't necessarily take a long time. What's essential is to practice efficiently and deeply and to devote yourself with great seriousness. Whether the strength of your own practice is indeed great or not, this is very important. If your practice is weak, however many mantras you recite, you've recited millions, how many in a certain monastery, when afflictions arise, it might even seem like not studying Buddhism would be better. What has this person actually learned? Looking at it this way, both oneself and others might feel it's a complete failure. So for those of us who are currently studying Buddhism at this moment, we need to see if we can transform our own mental continuum. If we change studying the application of suffering and happiness on the path, many people will over time become stronger in the future. There used to be a military academy in the West, and I heard that, as I understand it, the people who were trained there were extremely resilient and very skilled in combat. No matter what kind of battlefield they were on, each one of them was extremely brave. So in our own personal reflective places of spiritual practice, if you can really fix it well, and make sure everything is properly taken care of, then perhaps each of us will be exceptionally courageous and fearless in the face of suffering. But if we just perhaps, for example, listen to these teachings each and every day and simply drift aimlessly and without direction through life, squandering precious time, my words are meaningless, and what each of you gains may not actually be beneficial. If there's no benefit, you heard about Mahayana Buddhism, but apart from that, there's no real practical use. Today, we may have gone later than usual, but I sincerely hope that each one of us should, when facing suffering, to really truly take meaningful action and actually make a difference, we must be truly strong. Just saying, I want to be strong with words is definitely not enough. You must put in the effort and cultivate yourself. If you truly cultivate yourself, I believe that each person clearly has this potential and this ability, whether we can truly awaken this remarkable hidden potential within each and every one of us or not, depends on practice. The Buddha also said, I clearly teach you the path to liberation, your liberation. When transforming suffering and happiness into the path, I can't say anything else but turning suffering into the path. I myself personally have just a little bit of personal experience from my own life. Whether it's the suffering I may face in the future, before, when I faced pain, I think for myself, when it comes to this aspect, I don't feel particularly ashamed. Reason for this, I think that when I was young, I listened, contemplated, practiced, and I also spent a certain amount of time on it. Precisely because of this, what I am sharing with you today might be acceptable to some individuals. If I had never put in any effort in this area, if I had never practiced or studied the teachings, perhaps you wouldn't be attending my lectures or wouldn't be willing to listen. I believe that everyone present here today is the same. When you are truly pursuing your studies, you need to devote a certain amount of time, and this time should not be through motions. If you genuinely practice from your heart, then in the end, you will most definitely and absolutely gain significant benefits. When you obtain these benefits, no matter the situation you find in the future, if you use them or share them with others, they will always carry a certain power. This kind of power is just like, for some of us, for example, some people who study sports, if they do particularly well during their training sessions and really stand out, whether they use those skills themselves in the future or teach others, they will stand out. So in Mahayana practices of Tibetan Buddhism, there truly are many profound instructions. If these instructions remain as words on a page, then the instructions are instructions and people are people, and there will always be a certain gap, a certain distance between them. So I sincerely hope that each and every one of you here today, when it comes to such spiritual practices, don't stay in the books all the time. You must take these teachings and truly integrate them with the continuum of your own mind. Of course, the methods for integration will be discussed later on. That's all for today, everyone.
Bandharangara Padma Sodargye Bandharangara Padma Sodargye Bandharangara Padma Sodargye